Tar Heels hope to make some personal history in Tallahassee this weekend against Florida State. Tar Heels on the road to see the Seminoles. And Adam, fair to say this game doesn't have the storylines that we thought it would when this one was on the schedule at the beginning of the year for multiple reasons. First and foremost, of course, the Tar Heels coming off their best performance of the season. And so Mack Brown has said from the beginning of training camp that he wanted his team to be better at the end of the year than it was at the beginning, and he felt like it could be. And the Tar Heels have done so much thinking, planning, discussing, practicing of trying to close the season differently than they have the previous couple of seasons. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that Carolina was not trying to be successful. They would have loved to have had, I mean, I don't think it's unrealistic to think that two of the three of Georgia Tech, Duke, and Pitt, if you play those games again, that Carolina gets at least one, maybe two, maybe all three. I mean, they were all uber competitive. And certainly Duke and Georgia Tech were winnable games for Carolina. Pitt wasn't out of the question. So the Tar Heels looked their best last weekend. Was that 1 week, or was this going to be somewhat the team that we see moving forward? To me, a lot of it relies on that defensive front. Carolina's offense has been pretty steady this year. As we've discussed, I think it's gotten better and better and better as the year's gone on. A lot of that is because of the uncertainty at the quarterback position at the beginning of the year, and now Criswell, at minimum, has 5 starts under his belt and has learned things and experienced things that you just can't do until you've done them. I think Carolina's offensive line also, as Mack Brown has said, talented group that he felt like was going to be good eventually. They've worked through some injuries, and so hopefully it is a group that is continuing to improve. Carolina did not allow a sack against Virginia, first time against an FBS opponent this year that they've done that, and didn't have a turnover in that game. So I think that offense has continued to improve, and you would hope that it would continue on that trajectory here over the final month. So, Adam, the defensive front really is the question, because that, as we've said, that's the strength of Carolina's defense. And when it plays well, this is a different defense. It's a different football team. When it doesn't play well, Carolina's just kind of average to below average on defense, and it affects everything else that you're doing. And so that's the key. Can that defensive front play well? And again, you're not going to get 10 sacks every game, but you can pressure the quarterback. You can force him into rushed and poor throws. You can stuff the run. These are things that Carolina can do, has the personnel to do, has the scheme to do. Can the Tar Heels do that this week and over the final month? And if they do, I think Carolina can be very successful here over the final month of the season.
And it's no secret that Florida State's quarterback play has not been exceptional.
Yeah, look, FSU is 1-7 through 8 games. And the one game they won, they had to get a 4th down stop against Cal at the very end of the game to win it. So they have had a really, really bad season to this point. This is their last ACC game, which is crazy. Because they still have Notre Dame, Charleston Southern, I think, and Florida. So they're done with conference play after this game. Adam, 2 things about Florida State. One, I think their defense is pretty good. They've been asked to carry a lot this season. And so I think it has been hard for them to consistently be as good as I think their personnel is, because they're on the field a lot, and they are required to do a lot for Florida State to have a chance to be good. But if I was like, Adam, draw up a defensive lineman at the end position, it would probably look like Patrick Payton, one of their DNs. I said, draw up a couple D tackles that you think might be good. I mean, Josh Farmer, Darnell Jackson, these are dudes that they have. And yet then, Adam, you see them sometimes, and those dudes are getting pushed around, and teams are just running at will on them, which is confusing. I think they've started playing a couple of younger guys more here recently as the season, the record had gotten a little out of hand. Guys that I'm assuming they feel like are going to be big parts of their program moving forward. And so they've got the whole point of that is they've got some talent on defense. And if you let that defense gain confidence and be successful, that's trouble because they got some players. The real issue for Florida State has been on the offensive end, where they have been very, very poor this year. And in my opinion, from watching them, it is due to two things. First and foremost, it is the struggles they have had in keeping a cohesive group on the offensive line. I think this is right, Adam. I think it's 7 different starting combinations on the O-line in 8 games. Like, I don't care who you are. That's hard. When you got guys in and out of the lineup, injuries, one week you're starting at guard, but now I need you to start at tackle this week. I mean, it's hard. And they just haven't had the same group or even really close to the same group that's been able to start multiple games. And we just talked about Carolina's O-line a minute ago, and I think that's been a problem. And it's been hard for them to run the ball, and it's been hard for them to protect the quarterback because of that inconsistent nature, not just of the play, but of the personnel on the O-line. And then you mentioned the quarterback spot, and that's it. I mean, DJ Uiagalelei, a familiar name, not just because of its uniqueness, but because of his history in the league. You know, starter or heavy contributor at Clemson for multiple years, went to Oregon State last year, was really good for the Beavers, came back and was just okay. Wasn't terrible, but was just okay for Florida State at the beginning of the year. Then he gets hurt, and the last 4 games, they've been trying this combination of Brock Glenn, who's a redshirt freshman, and Luke Kromenhoek, who's a true freshman, and it just hadn't been very good. When you've got 2 guys who haven't played very much at quarterback and, you know, they're playing 2 or 3 possessions and then, okay, that's not working, let's put in somebody else. So inconsistent, poor play due to a lot of factors on the O-line, inexperience at quarterback. I mean, that's a bad combination, and the results have shown that. Adam, I'm going to get the stats here, but the offensive numbers for Florida State are pretty stunning. Like, total offense, there's now, checking my notes, 17 teams in the ACC, Adam. And I believe it's 133, I think, that play FBS football. Total offense. Florida State is 17th in the league, 131st out of 133 teams in the country. They average 272 yards. That's 170 less than Carolina per game. Rushing offense. They are 17th in the league, 130th in the country. They average 80 yards a game. Passing offense, 15th out of 17 teams, 101st in the country. Scoring offense, 17th in the league, 132nd out of 133 teams in the country. So, I mean, it's been a consistent struggle for Florida State offensively. And yet, having said that, you and I both know that doesn't mean anything when the Tar Heels come down there. They've got to go and do it. You can't let them get if they get confidence, they got guys at wide receiver. They've got dudes who can run the ball. You've got to just squash them. And if you do, they're 1-7. You can win this game. If you don't, and somehow this becomes like a shootout or something, that's going to be bad news. You can still win it, but that's not the game you want to be in.
Those offensive numbers are very bad.
I mean, Adam, they are, and I'm not saying this like pile on or make fun. It's stunning the struggles they've had on offense. But again, I just think when those two when your quarterback's having a tough time and when your O-line can't block consistently, I mean, those numbers show you what happens.
Well, as you already said, they've done it against a full league slate. Like, it's not like they've only played 2 conference games and everybody else has been Alabama and Georgia or something.
That's right.
They've played what passes for a full conference schedule now, almost. The other thing is, the last 2 times Carolina played Florida State, we were talking about a 1-win team. And that 1-win Florida State team both times then beat the Tar Heels.
Yeah, 2021, Carolina led that game. I think it was 14-0 or 10-0 early. And Florida State, Jordan Travis. Carolina could never stop Jordan Travis. And they came and won in Kenan Stadium. And then the year before that was the COVID year when Carolina was like 5th in the country. And it was like, 31-7 or something at halftime. And then the Tar Heels almost came back and won it. But, yeah, I mean, look, Mack Brown's never beaten Florida State. And that doesn't mean anything for this year. But what it does mean is that Carolina's historically had trouble against the Noles. They have 3 wins ever. And, I mean, when they're that few and far between, like, you can name them easily, right? 2001, the 41-9 game coming off of 9/11. 2010, remember those guys, we'll get there in a second. And then 2016 with Nick Weiler chopping down the sideline at the end of the game. That's the only time that Carolina's ever beaten Florida State. Now, look, nobody was beating Florida State in the 90s. They were the best program in the country for that decade. But this has been a team that, for whatever reason, past that dominant period, has still given Carolina trouble. I don't put any stake in Mack Brown's one of the best college coaches to do it. He's got a championship. He's in the Hall of Fame. He's top 10 all-time wins. Like, we know Mack Brown's resume. So it is unusual that he has not beaten Florida State, but I don't really put a lot of stake in that necessarily, other than I'm guessing he wouldn't mind getting at least one notch in that other column before he is done coaching, whenever that may be. But I think he'd rather get it for this group, because I do think a win this week, Adam, and you start going, wait a second now. You start thinking maybe things – Carolina's not winning the ACC, but you start thinking that maybe this can be a strong close if you win this game.
Well, then you'd be staring at a bye week, and you'd think about the remainder of the season very differently, because there would be things to play for. There'd be things to look forward to. There'd be some rivalry-type matchups that will be fun to play. It just changes the tenor of your November. I do think, like, this Florida State team's going to go down in history books as a case study of 2024 college football.
Oh, yeah.
For 2 reasons. Number one of the hardest things to get now is quarterbacks. But what we've learned from them is you really need 2, because everybody's bringing in a new guy who they think is going to be the best. Well, if he doesn't turn out to be the best, what do you do then? You need like a baseline guy who you're pretty confident he can do something, which Carolina was fortunate to have.
Yeah.
Florida State has not been fortunate enough to have that. And then the other thing is they made a lot of noise about how much they were paying their defensive line. And I would tie this back to some stuff Pat Narduzzi said this week at Pitt, where he talked a lot about how Pitt was paying a lot of guys last year to go 3-9. And he sat down with those guys and said, do you think you're going to get paid next year? And they were like, yeah. And he's like, well, if you were the one giving the money, would you give the money to guys who went 3-9? And they said, no. And he goes, well, you're not getting paid next year unless you produce. Florida State paid a lot of money to guys that have 1 win right now. And that's kind of 2024 college football. If you pay it out on the front side, there is no guarantee. Look, past results are not indicative of future success with your investment in your defensive line.
Let's not forget that you can't pay for play, and that and that you can't have performance-based payments in college athletics. Let's not forget that. And
Somebody tell Pat Narduzzi.
And let's just appreciate the moment that Adam is coming to the realization that he might be a grumpy old man like Pat Narduzzi is, and maybe Pat Narduzzi is actually Adam's boy. Like, Adam read that Pat Narduzzi interview and was like, this guy's making a lot of good points.
I'm not willing to go that far.
Maybe.
Well, I think he left out some key points in which someone basically told him to fire his staff. That part of the story he didn't quite go into. But I do think that's the case with this year's Florida State team, where they've got some problems that are sometimes going to rear their head in this environment, and they're having a hard time working through them, and hopefully that lasts for another week.
Well, that's the thing, is you respect Florida State, but you hope that their struggles continue another week, because if they put it together, I think the 2020 game's a good example. Now, their program was in a different place at that point, but I guess my point is, they can if they put it together for a half, even if it's for a half, you could be down 31-7, and then it's going to be very unlikely that you come back. So Carolina beat Virginia. You don't roll in here like you're a million times better than the opposition, and we're going to kick this ball off, and we'll show you what's up, and somewhere the mid-90s Tar Heels are going to cheer along with us. Carolina's got to go play. I think at this point, Carolina's had a better season than Florida State, but that's simply because Florida State's been so bad. The Tar Heels, the trajectory of the two teams for this season is different at this moment. But Carolina's got to continue that. I'm excited for this game, Adam, in the sense that I want to believe that Carolina's closing this season strong. And I want to believe that they have this fresh start, because I do think you've seen some seeds of it even as through the struggles. I want to believe that it's something that they can do. But they got to go do it, and they got to go do it in a place that's hard to do it against a team that's been hard for them to do it against. And so I just think it's a really good barometer for them, regardless of Florida State's record. A really good barometer for them of, are you really going to close the season this way? Have you really done these things to improve? Have you really fought through some adversity and gotten better? I think they have, but we're going to find out.
This is the classic head versus heart. My heart tells me these Tar Heels are about to do it. My head and all the history tells me that would be out of character.
Yeah, that's a fact.
But my heart says it's about to happen.
I hope Criswell plays well. I just think he's kind of under the radar, had a really the season he's put together, considering the circumstances, has been impressive to me. So I hope that he continues to play well, because I think he gives Carolina a chance to win. What a great point you made, Adam. There are some teams, there are many teams that if they were playing their third quarterback, it would be done. And somehow Carolina's ended up with this player who is if you were ranking, I think he's in the top half of the league in quarterbacks. And I'm not sure that many teams could say that when they got to this point of their depth chart. So what a just a cool story it is that he's continuing to play well. And Mac Brown's right in that he said that the only thing people care about with quarterbacks is wins. And he's right. Unless you're Drake May, and then we can also love you just because you're awesome. And you won a lot. But I hope it continues. And don't forget, he's got another year of eligibility. So I just think the Heels might have a sneaky good player at that position. We'll see. Okay. Adam, anything else about Florida State, Carolina? Again, it's 3:30. We're on the air at 2:30. One more thing. I'm going to knock on wood. I'm knocking on heaven's door here, Adam. In Mac Brown 2.0, Carolina has averaged allowing, what did I tell you? 39 sacks a year. 39. That includes one year they gave up 49 sacks. They've only given up 14. That's a really impressive improvement. Let's hope that continues.
It's gutsy to throw that out there before going down to Tallahassee.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll see if it continues.